Job Climate Talent Recruitment Retention session. I'm Cindy Luxon, an SVP of Development Services at OFN, and I'm here to provide a quick preview of our newest toolkit before handing it over to the panelists for the session. As we get started, I wanted to note that we are recording this webinar and provide a few housekeeping tips. So on the top right-hand side of your screen, you'll see icons for the chat and Q&A features. We encourage you to use the chat feature to comment, introduce yourselves, and interact with other participants throughout the session. Please feel free to submit questions using the Q&A box throughout the program as they occur to you. We'll address audience questions immediately following the session in an interactive Zoom room. In the Zoom discussion room, each participant will be able to use their video and audio to interact with the panelists and other attendees. And slide, please. As part of our next generation CDFI workforce initiative, we are developing tailored professional development resources and opportunities for CDFI practitioners, such as new in-person and virtual trainings, as well as a career center. We'll also be producing over 30 toolkits over the next couple of years to share leading practices on a variety of topics. You may have seen our first toolkit, CDFI 101, which was released last month and can be accessed via the event homepage or the link we're going to put in the chat. In the coming weeks and months, we'll be releasing a series of new toolkits. And today, we're actually releasing a new resource related to the topic of today's session of talent recruitment, retention, and management around how to write effective job descriptions, which you can also download via the link being shared in the chat. So it includes leading practices as well as sample language you can use to develop job descriptions for various functions at your CDFI. This resource is the first one of a broader talent recruitment, retention, and management toolkit we're compiling with the goal of assisting CDFIs with attracting new talent, supporting equitable hiring, retention, and advancement practices, providing insights into staffing trends, and offering actionable examples that make it easy to implement the leading practices shared. In 2023, we plan to release additional resources for this toolkit focused on the topics of compensation, managing 4 generations in the workplace, the hybrid work environment, DEI hiring practices, and much more. As a reminder, you can access and download these toolkits for free via CDFI Connect. Once you log in to CDFI Connect, navigate to the resources drop-down menu and select OFN resources. If you don't have a CDFI Connect account, you can join for free at the link being shared in the chat. A list of toolkits that are currently available can be found on the attendee hub, and the links are also in the chat. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Cindy Stewart at Community First Fund, the moderator for the session.
Thank you, Sindhu. Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. We have a lot to talk about in a short amount of time, but when it comes to recruiting, retaining, and managing your talent, I can speak from personal experience, as I know our other panelists will also. This is a top of mind for many of us, certainly going back to the Great Resignation that really ran from kind of November 2021 through April of 2022, and still some folks still experiencing some of the hangover from the Great Resignation. I'm going to do a quick introduction of our panel before we get started, and then you can find all of our bios on this session's on the web page. So I'm going to start with Allison Kelly. She is the CEO of the ICA Fund in Oakland, California. We also have Lakota Vogel, who is the Executive Director of 4 Bands, Community First Fund in South Dakota, joined by my colleague, Angel Rosario, who is the Director of Community Lending for Community First Fund in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And of course, I'm Cindy Stewart, the Chief Human Resources Officer for Community First Fund. So let's kick things off. We're going to start with the topic of talent recruitment, an area I know that we've all been challenged on. And Allison, I'm gonna start with you to kind of share some of your thoughts and maybe successes from the ICA Fund in this area.
Sure. Hello, thank you for having me here today. It's wonderful to be with you all. As you said, Cindy, thinking about talent retention and recruitment is I think the #1 priority of my job. I like to tell our folks that I am responsible for raising enough money to keep the lights on and make sure everybody's happy. You know, that's really what I try to do here. And when it comes to recruiting, we take a really intentional approach to drive equity and inclusion into our recruitment process. in the DE&I phase that kind of crazed across the country at the murder of George Floyd, being an anti-racist organization was important to us. But how we demonstrated that from top to bottom within the organization was mission critical. So what we did was we looked at all of our processes and procedures internally and externally. And that also had a role to play with how we recruit folks. So it was everything from how we write job descriptions, how we put our mission in the hiring process, how we have equitable ways of looking at and assessing candidates across candidates. And we embed our mission and our organizational values in the process, both in terms of where we recruit, how we recruit, but then also how we do the hiring process. How we do our interviews, how we compare candidates. So it really is deeply embedded in what we do. I mean, ICA, our mission is that we accelerate great businesses through mentoring and investments to close the racial and gender wealth gaps. I probably should have started with that. And so we reflect that mission in everything that we do. And that's why even in how we recruit, we take a really intentional approach and a really intentional way of identifying the talent that we want within our organization, including things that you don't even think about necessarily unless you are super intentional and attuned to what's going on here. But even in how we write job descriptions, we do a competency-based job description. So competency-based job descriptions put skills and experience in language that is more transferable across different communities and lived experience. So we really do look at all of these different components of our work in how we recruit.
That's great, Allison. I'm interested, Lakota, I'll move to you. If you heard some themes there from Allison that kind of struck home for you at 4 bands.
Yes, thank you. Happy to be here. So quick introduction of 4 bands just to set the tone for it. We're a rural native CDFI located in north central South Dakota. We've been operating for 23 years. So on average, my employees drive, 50 to 70 miles one way to get to the office. And this was COVID, pre-COVID, everything. It's just sort of the way of life. And so when we were talking about talent recruitment, we did a lot of introspection, like Allison mentioned as well. We really knew we wanted to reflect on what that looks like during this era, who we are, what our unique capabilities are as an organization in this space doing the work, and how to recruit the talent to fit that need. And I don't want to underscore like that is a lengthy process, right? Like that takes a good amount of time, and it's important to dedicate time to that for us all to reflect and do some program evaluation. So if you're in that stage, just give yourself grace to take the time needed to reflect on that. And one thing, that really came out for us was analyzing the difference between our capacity and our capability. And so it's kind of like the best analogy I heard was I have the capacity to be a runner, like I can run, but is that a capability of Lakota Vocal? No, not necessarily, right? Like I'm not a marathon runner at all. And so thinking of 4 bands, what our unique capability was, what are we good at? What can we say no to during this time of high demand as well? And center that so we can recruit the right talent for it. And it looked very similar to what Allison said of just reanalyzing our job descriptions, our value statements, and our vision statement so that we were creating the right culture at the workplace that sort of became a mental model for all of our employees to carry throughout the day so they could have their own direction to decide what we're working on and what we're not, but that it was a clear vision presented to them. And then that directed our recruitment. We also sort of just analyzed where in the past our talent came from, right? So a lot of it was random. It was, somebody that knows somebody, at least in our rural area. It wasn't using any of the online platforms or newspaper ads. It was really either a past client that had utilized our services, knew about us. So in this moment of looking for talent, we were trying to think of how to trigger those feeds of information. And a lot of it is for us is on the ground recruitment, talking to the universities that are educating the students that we know want to return back to the community and serve, right, in some capacity. And actually, it doesn't matter major, like it really is about community values. And that's what came out in that introspection of what values are we looking for. So a lot of it is reaching out to the colleges, finding the students, talking to them about the story and the narrative of our organization and asking them to come home. And then we get into the management style, which we can talk about next, of like, what are their workplace needs? Is it teleworking, right? But prior to that, we had to make sure that we had the systems in place to offer that in the recruitment phase. So we had to, and COVID helped us do this quicker than we would have liked, but we implemented a lot of teleworking systems, moved all of our systems online. Even for our customers, our platforms went online. So a lot of things merged at the same time, and you can kind of hear them mixing together. But in order to recruit the talent that aligned with what our mission was, we had to look at our mission and redefine what that was in the moment. So yeah, very similar situation for sure.
Yeah, thanks, Lakota. And it resonates with me too. I know that at Community First Fund, a couple things I think we realized as we were entering into a very heavy recruitment environment. The first, of course, was, as been mentioned by both Allison and Lakota, is this stronger connection to mission. My background is in public health. I had quite a lengthy career there before I switched and came to the light, as our CEO likes to say, of financial institutions. And I will say that one of the things that we always found in public health is when we were trying to recruit physicians was connecting them to the critical mission that we had to do. And I found the same, particularly as we were looking for a lending team. Was trying to help them understand that a community development financing institution, a CDFI, is not where you land when you're tired of banking. A CDFI is where you go when you're looking for mission fulfilled work. And it shifted. It shifted our entire recruitment strategy, especially when it came to lenders, to emphasize the mission part of what we do. Now, the reality of that, as we were hiring new staff because of growth, we certainly started to realize that from a compensation perspective, we had somewhere, in the years of kind of not needing to do as heavy lift on recruitment, had kind of languished in salaries, and we'd been surpassed by many organizations. And so we did undertake a pretty extensive compensation review. We did hire a compensation specialist who helped us with that. And if any of you have been through this, I mean, really the compression factor was a bit of a sticker shock. I mean, our folks, our tenured folks that had been with us for years had quickly been surpassed by the new folks coming on board in their salary expectations. So I do know that was a real boost to our recruitment. It was a little bit of a hard swallow for our leadership and the board, but it was the reality, hard to argue with the data. And so we really did just take a moment to decide to bring our compensation plan more into the reality of what we were facing in recruitment. I think the other thing, and Allison, I'll just say also, I think that by really emphasizing mission, sounds like your experience as well, and connecting that through the recruitment process, the really beneficial result to Community First Fund was diversity in staff. So we really did go from numbers where white staff was probably hovering around 65, 70% to where now our staff representing populations of color is now more around 75, 80. So all of that, I think, was a side effect of the mission-focused recruitment and really appealing to folks who wanted to come and support their communities, the communities that they lived in and came from. I'm going to switch gears a little bit right now to what we're calling the management of talent. So you've recruited them, now you're onboarding them. And in this case, I'm going to kick things off, Angel. I'm going to let you speak maybe just introduce yourself quickly and your role at Community First Fund, and then let you talk a little bit about once you came on board, what you experienced here at
Sure,
Community First Fund.
sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Angel Rosario. I'm a director of community lending, and I work for Community First Fund. Our mission is to create financial equity through wealth building opportunities for individuals, families, and business owners, and especially people of color, women, and immigrants. So I've been with Community First Fund for some time, and I would say helping new individuals understand the CDFI world is crucial, especially since a lot of the talent we get most of the time comes from other banks and organizations, that kind of people who have financial background. But they quickly learn that it's very different than working in a large commercial bank or even a small community bank. One of my goals as a more tenured employee is to make sure I take those people under my wing and try to acclimate them to the CDFI world as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Especially when it comes to the lending team, it's really important to help new lenders understand the difference between having policies that are in the box, like in the banking world, and then having guidelines and how to use those guidelines to get a deal done. You also really have to make sure people are, understanding of the mission and really believe in the mission. One of the main things about my job is that I love is that I can fight for my customers. I can fight for my clients. I can lobby, leadership, and I can talk to them and negotiate. And it's such an important part of the job that you have to have individuals with those kind of skills to be able to articulate themselves, to convince, a committee of people that this is a good risk to take. It's one of those things where, getting commercial lenders typically is where we get a lot of our talent from, small business bankers. It is a monumental effort to get them to the point where they feel comfortable in the CDFI world, especially when it comes to the policies, the procedures, the compliance aspect of it, the technical assistance aspect of it. It's just some people think it's easier, but it's definitely not easier than working in a commercial bank. From my commercial experience, you knew immediately a deal wasn't going to work, and you kind of moved on and you kept things moving. But in the CDFI world, there's always a way to make a deal work. And I truly believe that if the lender's willing to put the time in with the client and willing to put the time in with the staff to make that deal work. So I think, again, leadership, other tenured employees, it's really important to take those new employees under your wing and just try to teach them as much as possible and that whatever time you have. It's really key.
Yeah, thanks, Angel. Lakota, I'd be curious when you think about, I liked your strategies for how to get them there. How do you onboard? How do you connect them quickly to your mission and what you're wanting from them?
Yeah, I think onboarding is such a it can never be perfect. I think that's what I've learned is you can have it as loose and nimble as possible, and it's not perfect. And I think your end user, who is your new team, are always going to have feedback about how to improve it. And honestly, it's true. I think the CDFI industry has its nuances that are not easy to explain in a black and white folder. A lot of it is about just who you are, right? And that's why I think values are so important when you're recruiting versus the actual talent and skill set of something that you have. It's really a values-based onboarding system that I think. So what we've done, truthfully, is, COVID has allowed us to connect a lot more often. We have more of these sessions. I think what's come from the industry is a lot more talking about the work and different ways of connecting. Like, you don't have to go to a conference in person anymore. So many of us within my region, in the Mountain Plains region, the leaders within this region have been reaching out to each other and meeting more frequently to talk about this issue. And we're coming up with a plan similar to what OFN is doing, of a toolkit or kind of streamlining the onboarding process. And so it's not quite there yet, but at least we're writing things down now, right? And when a new team member comes, we actually have an agenda of what their first week will look like and where they're meeting with. But prior to this, it was really just sitting down in the seat and learning as you go. So I think we're proud that we've put things in writing. We have the first steps, but it's creating the plane as we're flying it, right? So I think as we're bringing a new team on, we'll get feedback about what went well, what they would like incorporated, and we continue to build out that onboarding schedule. But I did want to quickly mention something too about in recruitment and analyzing what you all did, Cindy, of the compensation schedule. And I think that's something not talked about enough within our industry. And we did something very similar as well. So it impacts recruitment, but it also impacts talent management. So the way we approached it was by leveling up our existing employees, taking care of our current team and saying, where are we at amongst industry, amongst inflation in the markets, and leveled up every employee at the organization first, and then applied that to a recruitment strategy, right? And so you're right, it was kind of a shock to see what the industry is doing, or what we should be doing, and it felt good to make that decision and make that pivot. I will say, as a person in charge of fundraising, like Allison mentioned, it's a little nerve-wracking, and we're hoping, right, that this moment of CDFI capital coming to us doesn't go away, that we want to remain hopeful that that's going to stay the way it is, but it was something that was necessary to do for retaining talent as well as recruiting talent.
Yeah, thanks, Lakota. Yeah, I've often said that kind of as we got more sophisticated in our management, prior to that, I literally would tell employees that we have a deep end of the pool onboarding strategy. You just jump in. We've got some lifeguards surrounding the pool to help you out if needed, but I do like the fact now that we can let them ease a little bit into the pool, maybe get their feet wet, then their knees, then on and on. But yes, you're right. It's a work in progress, bringing people on board. And Allison, I'd please share your thoughts on kind of how that, once you've done the recruitment, now trying to get them through those first weeks and months.
Well, I think we all sort of share this culture, right? I mean, the work that we do is that we all exist in an economy that has become very extractive. And so for me, especially at ICA, the last few years, I don't feel like we can be aligned with meeting our mission of creating wealth for business owners of color and women if we ourselves are operating an organization that is extractive to the people who work here. And so that sort of mindset has been something that we've been implementing over the last few years, like I mentioned, and it starts, with our org structure. I mean, most org structures have a top, right? Ours has a bottom. When I share our org structure with our board and with onboarding team members, I'm at the very, very bottom. And I think about how do I lift everybody else up as we go along and do our work. So, I mean, culturally, that's just how we operate. That's kind of what my MO is. And I think that that's reflected throughout the organization here. We also really make clear what the goals and objectives are for the organization and how that relates to your job. And I don't know, for those of you who are familiar with Brene Brown, one of her tenets is, one of the things that she says is clarity is kind. And that it can be really hard to be clear, but we put a lot of focus on being really clear so the expectations are clear internally and externally about what we're trying to achieve and what you're responsible for. So we have all kinds of different ways of managing that within our teams, including RACI charts, who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, and who's informed on any particular project that's going through the organization. And we start every project that way. And so this idea that there's clarity and that we have accountability and ownership over what we're responsible for and knowing what exactly that is. We also did a really intentional comp review starting in 2019. We've done it now every single year. And again, we look at the jobs not by title, but by competency. So what are the other roles that have those same competencies and how are they being compensated and how can we compete? We are a venture capital certified CDFI. I forgot to say that in the beginning. And so what that means is that we don't have a typical loan structure here. We have more of an investment structure here. So it's a longer term. We take ownership in some of the companies that we invest in. We use convertible notes and equity. And so part of our comp structure is to also include bonuses. And bonuses, the way that we attribute and earn bonuses is it's organizational performance and then individual performance. And what we've tried to do is be really intentional about aligning all of our activities so that we're all moving in the same direction together. You know, you think about all these rowers rowing a boat, and we're all rowing the same boat in the same direction. And that takes a lot of clarity and communication and self-accountability. The other thing that we do is, you know, we really do operate with this ethos that every voice on our team matters. Full stop. And so that shows up in a lot of different ways. It shows up in our comfort level. People have no problem calling me out and saying I've stepped over a boundary or I've made a faux pas, which I appreciate. I want to be called out for that. It also means that we see people as whole humans. And one of the little activities that we do is we have a joy lunch every month. And we have a joy jar where people put sticky notes about what they appreciate about other folks. And somebody put in there that they appreciate that I see people as their whole self. Mm-hmm. And I mention that because when we think about managing people, we're managing humans to, yes, meet the needs of the mission and execute on our mission, but that's why they're here. What other goals do they have as individuals? How can we help support their growth here at ICA for as long as we get to have them here, but also in their life? Because at the end of the day, we are all people. And in order to have the kind of economy that we envision, we all need to be supported to be in our highest and best use as people. And so we really try to manage in that way as well and put infrastructure and incentives around that. So hopefully that helps answer your question, Cindy.
Yeah, it really did, Allison. I was trying, it's hard to moderate and sneak that you're taking notes at the same time because you were saying some things there that were really resonating with me. So I appreciate that. And I think as we kind of move our discussion, you were a good segue into some even longer term retention strategies. And Lakota, I know that, you know, in as we were putting this session together, I think you all are doing some pretty unique things also in terms of how you can focus on the whole person as employees and really the effort really being to retain them and engage them as long as we can. So maybe you're willing to share some of those things that you're doing at Four Bands.
Yeah, I think, you know, Allison said it best with looking at them as, you know, as everybody and adopting a culture where just respecting the whole life of the person, the conveniences that happen, you know, with daycare and being flexible in that space. And so a lot of the things that were inhibiting the sort of retention of staff were issues that came up outside of the workplace, you know, for if they need flexibility with driving their children to work, especially the distance it gets to be at the workplace. And so a lot of it has been us incorporating a flexible work environment where you can check in and say where you're at, but it's not about being boots on the ground in a place anymore and clocking in and clocking out. It's really about getting the projects done, but accepting that not from the top tier of your organization, but throughout the whole organization, clerical staff to management, you know, and we really have adopted that. We are looking at developing, we need housing for sure in the location of where we're serving in the communities. And so we are looking at, we've purchased land, 4.65 acres, to look at possibly adding those extra add-on features for employee retention. And, you know, simple things we've also done are just adopting a retirement policy at the organization to reward the team. We do have a small sort of 3% retirement contribution, right? But we wanted to do more than that. And so we did adopt a retention policy or retirement policy after 10 years at the organization. We've increased health benefits. We used to just do 100% to all employees. Covered their health benefits, and now we opened it up to family and dependents. So adopting and covering 70% of family and dependents. Once again, just recognizing they need support, right? And we want to ensure that they're happy here. We don't want them to sacrifice their health to work at this organization. We really want to take care of them and their family. So those were some big picture things. We've looked at like leasing. So we're an incubator. We also have an incubator here. So it's easier for us to adopt and purchase like a daycare building and do a lease to own to an entrepreneur, and possibly take up like 5 to 7 slots at that place for Forband's employees' children. And it could just be housed right next door, which would be great if our children could be right next door to us and playing and not having to drive 40 miles to get my child from daycare where he's currently at, you know, if they have a fever. So we're looking at doing things like that. It's not fully developed, but we do believe in adopting some infrastructure strategies too to support, you know, a healthy workplace environment.
Yeah, that's really innovative. I think you had some great ideas there, Lakota. I know that even though we may be kind of past the tsunami of the Great Resignation, there is no doubt we are still not in a we're still in a very competitive recruitment market. And so I think that anything that you can do to kind of set yourself apart from, you know, you're bombarded. You go to LinkedIn. I mean, I open my LinkedIn and there's 5 HR jobs I could take today if I wanted to, right? So we know our folks are being bombarded regularly. Allison, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this and anything from your perspective in the retention space.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because again, our mission and our values comes into play. And so if we really want to create an economy that is built for all of us and closing the racial and gender wealth gaps, I mean, one of the things that we do internally is the work that we're doing and how we invest in entrepreneurs. Nobody else, to my knowledge, is doing it the way that we're doing. So sometimes we're really pulling our hair out, trying to figure out the best way to do this and what's most equitable for them and for us. We do that also with our 401k plan. Most 401k plans, if you do have a match, Lakota, you mentioned your 3% match. We have a 6% match now. Usually the distribution of the match from the organization is based on dollar amounts the employee contributed, because it's a match, dollar for dollar, right? Or 50% to a dollar match. And all of a sudden we were looking at that and realizing, wait a second, that preferences folks that have more capacity to contribute to their 401k. So maybe the more highly compensated people or the people who are able to put more money into retirement are going to get outsized benefit from that, which is an employer match. So we took it apart and we rebuilt it. And now what we do is we accrue half of that equally, or we accrue for 3% across the board. So based on people's salaries. And then we equally distribute it across the country, across that organization. So at the end of the year, what that pool is for those contributions gets equally distributed to every employee. So that's another way that we tried to look at equity internally. And that helps retain talent. Obviously, I think the clarity, I think the opportunities for growth, I think that the way that we compensate, the way that we provide bonuses, all of that helps retain talent. The other thing that we have done is, you know, I think that the pandemic really shed an important light on mental health and has been an important piece in destigmatizing the needs of all of us to have a mental health state that we can maintain. So one of the things that we implemented during that time was we do 4 mental health days in the year. And it's not you get to pick the day, it's we shut the office down so that people aren't on their mental health day. And I'm using air quotes because when your colleagues are sending a bunch of emails and they're still working, it's hard to really take the day off. So we shut the office down. And that really does give people more of a break. It's a shared break. We also, once we were able to afford it, we were able to add more healthcare benefits to our plans. So we don't just have an HMO, now we have a PPO, and that includes free counseling, mental health counseling. So there's a lot of things that we do to try to help make sure that we're offering good jobs that are practicing what we preach, creating wealth as much as we can for employees. We're a nonprofit, so we can't be, you know, it's not that we're providing returns to our employees, but we are providing a good job where you can bring your whole self here, We're trying to find opportunities for growth. We have folks on our team actually who should have been here instead of me today who want more opportunity to practice speaking. And so we are looking at trying to provide folks those opportunities. Unfortunately, nobody else could do it today. So here I am. You're stuck with me, but I love it. So it's okay. But really trying to identify the areas where people want to grow and give them those opportunities.
Yeah, thank you, Allison. We're glad you're here too. By the way, Angel, I'm gonna let you share your thoughts. I mean, I am your chief HR officer, so I'm hopeful that you're gonna be sharing really good news about retention at Community First Fund. But I know folks would really like to hear a perspective from someone on the front line who is given choices every day.
Sure. Yeah. And Allison, and you guys have some great points there. I love what you're doing at your organizations. Yeah, Community First Fund, like Cindy said, they really made a shift in how they look at employee retention and how they try, what they try to do in keeping employees happy. We learned that every employee desires something different. And I think it's really important to understand what that person desires. Some are very money motivated, some are opportunity motivated. Some are workhorses and they just love the work and love getting into the grind of things. So in my case personally, I'm very motivated with the results. How many people can I help? Can I change somebody's life? Can I drive down my street and say I opened that business and that business and that business, and that really gets me going. And of course, with that, money follows, right? If you perform well, those things always come to the person who's performing well. As far as incentive, you all mentioned, I think incentive is really important. One of my leaders had told me recently that getting a loan approved and closed is almost like a little miracle every single time. There's a tremendous amount of work and dedication that goes into closing loans that we CDFIs do, and not just on the front ends of the lender. It's back office, it's the closures, it's compliance, it's fundraising. I mean, it's just, there's so many people that touch one deal that, looking to incentivize the company as a whole, maybe with like Christmas bonuses, or lenders with incentivizing them for every loan they close. Those things are huge. They mean a lot to people. So it's one of those things that having an incentive plan and benefits that is controllable for the employee, in the sense that they can achieve these X amount of goals and be able to control what they're being incentivized. Being incentivized at the end of the year as a thank you, for example, like a Christmas bonus or something like that. I love the idea of the 401k. We've really made a big shift in making sure that people are heard. They're treated like, again, whole people. I think it's a great saying. And that, they're provided opportunities. Those opportunities are clear. They're achievable. And again, I think putting all that together is really huge. Another thing I love about the organization is that, we see the leadership every day, luckily here at corporate, and they sit with us and they talk to us and they say hi to us. And those things, for me personally, mean a lot, because that means they see us also. So I think being able to, touch leadership as much as you possibly can, depending on the size of your organization, I think is also a great benefit. Because if you work in a large commercial bank, you never do that. You never get to really understand why an organization is going in a specific direction, or hear from the person's mouth who is actually, implementing these strategies and doing them day by day. So I think all these ideas were great. And, I'm really happy with Community First Fund has done. I have the luxury of being here over a certain amount of time. So I've seen how things change, which always makes you appreciate things more.
Thank you, Angel. I did not pay him to say any of that. Totally voluntary.
I promise it is.
Really, I appreciate all of you, Angel, Allison, Lakota. I think the one thing that I'll share on behalf of our panel is there's no perfect answers in this work, as all of you know. I mean, we come together, we were able to share kind of our best thoughts, best thinking, this moment in time. But this is a challenge, finding talent, bringing that talent on board, and creating an environment where They're engaged in the work, they're engaged in our success. That is challenging work, and it ebbs and flows, right? So I think that, for me, kind of the takeaway to all of this discussion really centers a bit on the flexibility, opening yourselves to new ideas. You heard many folks talk about opening your ears to your staff. We heard that in the opening plenary this afternoon. The more thoughts that you can bring to the table, and the more willingness you are to kind of move away a little bit from the rigid constructs of human resources from the past, I think that that's really going to be the success for all of us going forward. And those are not easy habits to shed. And I'm so happy to hear kind of a representation on this panel of organizations that are in different stages of that. And you only have to be in a room full of people and throw out the whole idea of work from home, hybrid, or office based to know that we are all over the spectrum when it comes to how employers are facing those things. So again, thank you to Allison, Angel, and Lakota. I hope all of you are going to be able to join us in our question and answer period. If you're watching this live, you can access the Zoom room by clicking on the join the interactive discussion link. It'll take us about a minute. We all have to zoom out of this room and zoom into the question and answers. And if you can't join us for that session, I really hope to see you at our closing plenary at 4:30. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you in just a second or two in the question and answer room.